Thank you so much for coming out here and being with us for what promises to be a very special evening. You, as you know, are now not only in the Skirball Museum, but in a Skirball Museum that is located on the historic Cincinnati campus of the Hebrew Union College. A Hebrew Union College, the first rabbinical seminary founded in the Western Hemisphere, that is about, in just a few weeks, to launch its celebration of its 140th year.
Wow.
And a Hebrew Union College that is about to launch its celebration of its 140th year, and whose Jewish roots very much extend to the West End of this city. And to those Jews who lived there, to those Jews who are buried there, to the synagogues that were formed there, and to community life that shaped our urban identity. And so it gives me great pleasure this evening to welcome all of you here, to welcome you here for an evening wherein we shall return to our past, to some of the happy moments of our past, and perhaps the less happy moments of that past, so that we may remember and that we and our children may know our stories and our roots. And so, I am honored and delighted to welcome to this podium the director of the Skirball Museum, without whom this evening, the exhibit that is associated with the program of this evening could not have taken place. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Abby Schwartz.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. This is truly a delight to see such a great turnout on the first really cold day of our winter season. So I'm really grateful for your presence, and we're going to keep the preliminary remarks very brief. I did want to mention that tonight's program would not be happening were it not for the generosity of the Daniel J. Ransohoff Lectures Fund of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. I also would be remiss if I did not tell you that there's someone missing from the panel. Carl Westmoreland fell yesterday and broke his hip, and he is probably in surgery as we speak. He called me twice today while he was waiting to have surgery to tell me how sorry he was that he couldn't be here, and is determined to record his comments and his memories of what he described as his personal and professional relationship with Danny Ransohoff. He also, when we met to speak about this panel and we were going through photographs together, he recalled meeting Danny in the West End across from the Sterling Hotel, which doesn't mean anything to me, but probably means something to those of you who grew up here and lived here. I am a transplant, but and how they had these heated and emotional conversations about these buildings that were to be demolished and that they were putting X's on the buildings, and he got all emotional just thinking about it all these years later. So he really wanted to be here, and I told him that we would be sending all our prayers and thoughts for a swift and complete recovery from his surgery. I also want to tell you that in addition to the photographs that are upstairs that are largely going to be spoken about tonight, there's other photographs which are in the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives just across the parking lot by the photographer Ben Rosen. And they are remarkable photographs of Cincinnati buildings and Cincinnati historical events that were such a favorite subject for Ben Rosen. And the archives building will be open until 9 tonight, so if you would like to walk on over across the lot or run since it's cold. It will be available for you to see tonight, and they also are open during the week, Monday through Friday from 9:30 to 4:30, and Fridays from 9:30 to 2:30. So please take advantage of the opportunity to see those photographs as well, which sort of give you a different kind of perspective because they deal with larger parts of our community, downtown, Fountain Square, the 1937 flood. I mean, he lived a very long, full, productive life, and he made photographs for several decades. So they're a wonderful representation there. I also want to let you know that following the program, one of our panelists, John Harshaw, will be selling his book called Cincinnati's West End for a bargain price of $20 and an autograph. So we hope that you will take advantage of that. And the exhibition will also stay open here following the panel discussion. But the most important thing is that we have brought together an incredible group of people here tonight. And this wasn't easy. Finding a date that all of them were in town, available, could be here, and finding another date to have a meeting to talk about what was. So I feel like once that happened, everything else was a piece of cake. So you have in your hands everybody's bio. We're not going to take the time to even say any of this, just their names. Dan Hurley, Dr. Gary Zola, Terry Grundy, Scott Gamper, and John Harshaw. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dan, and I know it's going to be great. So thank you.
Thank you, Abby. We're going to have each of our panelists speak briefly this evening. I say this not only to the audience, but to remind the panelists they have 5 minutes. And we will stop them because we want to involve the audience. And we also want to make sure we end the formal part of this program on time so that you have a chance to go upstairs to really view the photographs. Some people I know got a chance to go up before this session, so you have some images in your mind. I want to point out that outside the hall, there are these cards. And it is very important to know that any exhibit is not the end. It's a beginning of a conversation. And so many of you who walk into that hall will see photographs that you'll say, I know a story behind that. I know where exactly that is, because some of them we don't know where it is. And I know where that is. I know the story of the people who lived in that house, or I know that person. Take the time to fill this out, because if you don't, that memory will get lost forever. This is our opportunity to deepen our understanding of the dynamic of the West End, which has been home for so many people over the years. Before we get started, I just want to say one thing. I knew Danny Ranselhoff personally. It was a great gift. And those of you who might have known Danny probably knew him from his bus tours or from having a conversation with him or walking in his office when he had to go over and get his scarf on before he could talk to you. And practically every conversation probably left you like it did me, sort of exhausted and sometimes bewildered, just words poured out. But what Danny will be remembered for, and what George Rosenthal will be remembered for a century from now, 2 centuries from now, is the photographs that they made that we're talking about tonight. Because the ability of the photographer to focus our attention on a specific aspect of life is so important and such a gift that it can't be overvalued and it can't be forgotten. So we really have an opportunity tonight to remember what the power of the image and the power of the photographer is as we move through our program this evening. We're going to begin with John Harshaw, and I Abby just said it, but I want to reinforce the books are on the back table, and you can buy one this evening. And John is going to begin by talking a bit about the West End that he not only knew himself, but also has gathered for us and for all of his readers in this book. John?
Thank you. First of all, again, let me thank you for coming out. All the choices that you had and places that you could choose to go, and you chose this evening to come and share with us, and I appreciate that. I'm honored to be here with this panel and with these people to talk about a place that I grew up in, that I lived in 19 years, and that I loved. There were over 3,000 people living in that community. There were more than 3,000 businesses in that community until the bulldozers came and tore down not only the buildings, but tore down a lot of people's connection to each other, because what happened was community was torn down. And they had to move to different places, and that community was hard to bring together. In the picture that I was going to show you, Budden Carter, I was born on Carr Street. I grew up on 7th Street. On the corner of 7th and Carr was Abe Faust's grocery store. And Abe was our Jewish grocer that extended credit to us weekly. He was the first to extend us Visa, MasterCard credit on the back of a little notepad or a brown paper bag as we got our groceries, and we paid him weekly. But beyond that, Abe Faust was central in my life. Later in life, I became a bank president. But how I got to that point is the story of Abe and I. I was an honor student, so they gave me a little job down at Shillitoe's to earn a little money. I thought it was going to be all summer and I was going to have these great new clothes, but it was only for a few days. I got my check and I went to Provident Bank, which was on the corner of 8th and Freeman Avenues. And I said, I want to open an account, save my money. They said, well, you can't open an account here. I said, well, why is that? They said, because we don't allow blacks to open accounts here. And I said, wow. I said, you're the only bank in our community. He said, yeah, I know, but that's the policy. So I left and went to Abe's grocery store to allow him to maybe cash the check. I'd take some home. And I told him what happened, and he said, come go with me. And we went back to Provident Bank, and Abe told him, said, look, I have money in this bank. I have Jewish friends who have money in this bank, and if you don't allow him to open an account, we're going to take our money out of this bank. Wow. Okay? That's rough. And I said, wow. And then I said, okay, how do I get it out? And they said, well, you fill out a withdrawal slip. And then they said, but a white person has to be with you to draw the money out. And Abe said, oh, no, that's not going to happen, okay? So it's because of Abe that policy, at least for me, changed. I don't know that it ever changed for the community. And when I was in the 9th grade, Abe would teach me how to operate a grocery store. He would teach me about loss leaders, what he was selling, why he was selling it. And he was just a great inspiration to me throughout my life. And I stayed in touch with him for years and years, even when I left the city and until he passed. And it was like that in that community, that we had all types of people, and we inhaled each other's life, we inhaled each other's spirits, we inhaled each other's customs. On that same corner of Carr Street was the German grocer, Mr. Braun. And you could go in there and you traded 2 old funny books for 1 new one, okay? Then there was an Italian family down at the far end of Carr Street. Up on Freeman near Van Horn Alley was a gypsy family. We were always warned not to walk on that side of the street. They'll kidnap you, and you'll find yourself in Europe somewhere. But for me, they had a very pretty daughter, so I didn't mind being kidnapped. So I went anyway. But it was a special place full of happy lives, full of a lot of customs, a lot of things that people shared with each other. And ironically, a friend of mine, Jenks Morton, who was Sugar Ray Leonard's trainer and a trainer for a lot of boxers, we went to one of Sugar Ray Leonard's fights, and another friend of mine, Weston Sykes, came along. And I told him, I said, Wes, I still have your sweater from high school. What do you want me to do with it? He said, well, I think you can throw it away. Neither one of us can wear the thing, you know, if you want to give it. But it was that kind of community. We ate at each other's houses, we wore each other's clothes, and we shared. And here was the big thing. If you messed up anywhere, they had the right to whoop your butt. If you went down to Abe's house and did something wrong, he'd take you back by the freezer, warm you up, call home and say, John said a cuss word. And when you headed home, I got whooped in parental order. My grandfather, then my father, my uncles, and my aunt, all whoopings, okay? So I learned my lesson very early, okay? I don't want to do this stuff. I don't need all of these whoopings. And my grandfather would kind of mentally torture you before a whooping. He would say, what time is it? I said, well, it's 8 o'clock. He said, okay, go out and play. I'm going to whoop you at 9. Okay? So you go to the schoolyard, you're playing baseball with your friends and everything, and we were right by St. Anthony's Catholic Church, and the clock gonged on the half hour and the hour. So when time came and it was gonging, all your friends would say, John, it's time for you to go get a whooping. So you go home, I'd go home, nothing happened, I'd get into bed, go to sleep. Next day, he'd come home from work. He said, I was supposed to whip you last night, wasn't I? I said, yes, sir. He said, what time is it? I said, it's 9. He said, well, I'm going to whoop you at 9:30. I said, no, whoop me now, please. And let's get this over. But the West End was just a special place. It was that place that you went that was a melting pot for all cultures. You know, I never knew what kielbasa was until, you know, I went to a Polish family's house and they showed me what kielbasa was and how to make it and how to make geta from the Germans and everything else. So it was just a special place. And I have tried chronicling all of that history in my book to share, because when I first met with Dan and of course with Scott years ago, and we talked about that idea because there was no written history of what the West End was like. So I took it upon myself to sit down and chronicle that history so we could share that with generations to come. So one, they knew we existed. Two, they would know what we did in those communities, and for the younger people today to understand what their grandparents and even great-grandparents went through in that community. So with that, I think my 5 minutes are up.
A wonderful way to get us started and remind us that the West End was a complex place, not the monolithic place that some people may think of it, however they may think of it. And it's a wonderful way to get us started. Thank you. We're going next hear from Dr. Gary Zola.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to add my own very warm word of welcome to all of you to our historic campus. And, you know, of course, one of the greatest challenges for me, I've been given 5 minutes, and I always tell Abby it takes me 5 minutes to take a breath. So I don't know if I'll be able to live within that, but I'm going to try. Because the show is over. When I'm on your show, Dan, I say my name and it's over. So yeah, but let me tell you a little bit about quickly the history of Jewish life in this city and the West End. It's really very interesting that in terms of American Jewish history, many people don't realize that, believe it or not, death is often the springboard to the life of Jewish community in various cities in our country, and this is how it works. Frequently, not always, but most of the time, you have small individual numbers of Jews who come and come into new areas in America. They come on their own, and they're very courageous, pioneering type who are willing to forego all the amenities of Jewish life, the things that they need to keep their religious life going, kosher food and synagogues and so forth, in order to earn a living and have an opportunity to do better. And that's a big trade-off, but it shows you that very often they're ready to put their religious traditions aside in order to venture into new areas. And then what happens often is someone will pass away. And, even if there's hundreds of people in a community, you may know the other 2 or 3 Jews who you know are here, and even if they're not practicing Jews, you all know you have this common feature. This is how it often works in America. This is how it happened in Cincinnati, Ohio. And then someone passes away. And when that person passes away, then suddenly, the spirit of religious tradition is, you're reminded, my gosh, we have to keep these traditions relating to mourning customs. It has to do with death. It's a serious business. One thing you have to do is you have to purchase what's called sacred ground so that you can be buried with your community. And then once that happens, you frequently have to say the prayers over the dead. So you gather together the other Jews who can say the prayers over the dead with you, and then you say to yourself, well, we did this for a week in memorial to this deceased friend. Well, maybe we could get together for the high holy days and say prayers too, after all. And it's often from that a community comes into existence. Really the most vibrant, in a sense, time in the West End for the Jewish community was in the 19th century. And it's, believe it or not, it's really the West End, it's in that part of Cincinnati that you see the beginnings of the whole Jewish community and its great history in this community, because this is exactly what I said is what happened in this community. An individual died. In this case, the rumor is, the way the story is told, he didn't even know, nobody in the community knew he was Jewish. But he's dying, he knows he's dying, his name was Benjamin Leap. He calls 2 men who he knows were Jewish to come to his bedside. And he says, I have never told anybody, no one knows, I'm married to a non-Jewish woman, my children are being raised as non-Jews, but I am Jewish, and I wish to be buried in Jewish sacred ground. I beg you to purchase that ground and create a cemetery. These 2 men are committed to this idea. They go out, and I'll spare you the details, but ultimately they find a small little piece of ground, and Benjamin Leib is the first person buried in that ground. And there is absolute proof, even though the famous B'nai Israel congregation, Rockdale Temple, says that it has its beginning in 1824. Leib dies in 21, and the documentary records of Cincinnati already indicate there's a Jewish congregation praying in 1822. So possibly Rockdale may have incorporated, or its history says it begins in 1824, and I'm not going to argue about that, but we definitely know Jews were beginning to pray in 1824. So that tells you that just this, that I've described, this process did happen here in Cincinnati, and you're looking at some pictures that are in the exhibit of the famous Chestnut Street Cemetery, which is the oldest Jewish cemetery west of the Alleghenies. And you're looking at pictures that have been taken, obviously, before the cemetery was refurbished or repaired. And that's something, if you go down today, you see that although many of the stones have been lost, many have been preserved, and it is being kept in a much more handsome way today. The other quick thing I want to say, and then I'm going to put a plug in for Mr. Harshaw's book, and that is that the Jewish community never really, in the earliest days, that's the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, didn't really live there. They lived and worked primarily downtown. And then, of course, that was where the cemeteries were. There were other cemeteries in that area. But after those other cemeteries moved away or were used for other purposes, if you will, immigrants began to come to Cincinnati, among them Jewish immigrants, and particularly towards the end of the 19th century, various synagogues were actually set up in that part of the city, often for Polish immigrants, Russian immigrants, and so forth, who came towards the end of the 19th century. And one of the pictures, I don't know if you're looking at it now, yes, okay, well, that's a drawing, but if you look, okay, that picture, if you see over in this right, I guess your right, there's a little teeny white building peeking up with little spires. Can you see it hidden back there? So that is the Lodge Street Synagogue. That would be the Plum Street Temple's predecessor, meaning that's where they prayed. And then, of course, it continued to stand after Plum Street was in existence. It was used for other purposes, and of course now it's gone. And there were many others. There's still some standing. There's one on John Street that's today a church. There's also another little synagogue that's right next to the Betts house. All of this is on the West End. And then finally, and it brings me to Mr. Horshaw's book and the